Hi, welcome to Quilting with Lori. Today I want to share with you how you can easily and quickly make 32 half square triangles from two 11-inch squares, a light and a dark. Two different prints here. I've got a light, this one happens to be stars on a cream colored background. Here we have stars on a red background, and I'm going to show it to you today on this cream, light cream, and then this blue. And these are both cut at 11 inches square. What we're going to do is create a design here that we are going to actually sew. We're not going to sew on all of these lines. We're only going to sew on the purple lines, and I'm going to show you that. But here you're going to be able to create 32 2.5-inch half square triangles quickly and easily. So let me show you how this is done. The first thing that I did on this 11-inch square block, of course, is I placed the light and the dark, the two prints, right sides together, and I have pinned them up in the corners here. And what I'm going to do is find the halfway point, which is 5.5 inches, and I have drawn a line at the halfway point and 5.5 inches here. I've drawn another line. Those are going to end up being cutting lines eventually, but right now they're just blue lines, which we need to identify. Then from that, those two halfway points, we need to find the halfway point between here and here, and here and here, and that's actually 2 3/4 inches. So what I'm going to do is take my ruler and move it up 2 3/4 inches and draw a line there. And it's also 2 3/4 inches from here, so it's the halfway point between those. So I have a halfway point here, which is 2 3/4 inches from either from the end or from the center. And I have a halfway point here, which I've drawn, which is 2 3/4 inches either from here or from the center. And I have just used my ruler to draw those lines. I'm going to do the same thing this direction. So here's the center. I'm going to measure over 2 3/4 inches here and draw that, or you can measure from the edge 2 3/4 inches in, and we're finding those lines. Now that we have the grid on our block, now we're going to make these two large rectangles. And the rectangles are actually what we're actually going to be sewing around. We're going to be sewing scant 1/4 inch seam allowances all the way around on both sides of those rectangles. So I'm simply going to take my ruler and draw from line to line, here to here, here to here. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that on this block. So here we have this set of blocks. They're paired up, right sides together, and you can put the pins in the corner if you choose to. I am going to find the 5.5 inch mark, and I'm going to draw down the center there. The 5.5 is because the square is 11, so half of 11 is 5.5. There we go. So we now have those done. Now we're going to do the other half. We're going to half each of these squares to create this grid. I've used my blue disappearing pen to make the grid. I don't think it's dark enough for you all to be able to see that, so I'm going to use just a magic marker. This is just a test sample anyway, and these are actually going to be the cut lines. So I'm going to go ahead and redraw those same lines so that you can actually see it. So this is the halfway point here, and that is 5.5 inches. I think you can see that better now. Here is the halfway point there. That's 5.5 inches. And then I'm going to go over 2 3/4 inches from the center, or you could do it from the outside and make another line. What I'm doing here is just creating a grid, and here's another 2 3/4 inches from the outside. All right, now I'm going to do 2 3/4 inches from the bottom here, or it would be the top for you, I guess. And 2 3/4 inches from the center. So now I have a complete grid, and I believe you can see this a little better. Once you have your grid done, there's actually 16 squares here. What we're going to do is create the two rectangles that go at a diagonal. And to create those two rectangles, you are going to line up your ruler that will stretch across from this point here through this center square here over to this point right there. So I'm going to try the purple and see if the purple shows up any better for you. Hopefully it will. I'll do it really dark here. All right, so we've done that. Then I'm going to draw a line from corner to corner on that outside square and corner to corner on this outside square. Then I'm going to draw from that point to this point. You'll see I'm going to start here. I'm going to go through the center square here and through the center of the outside too. So there is one rectangle that I have drawn. Now we're going to draw the other rectangle. I'm going to follow the same procedure. I'm lining up my ruler from this outside square here, the corner there, down to this corner here. And I'll try and make sure this is really dark so you can see it. So you're simply just using the grid itself to make your markings. And again, I'm starting out here on this outside corner, and I'm going to come over to this outside corner, going through the center of those squares in the middle there. And I need to also finish off this with a diagonal line. All right, so hopefully you can see there are two rectangles here. And what we're going to do, I am going to start sewing probably on the outside of this line a scant, and I mean a scant. I would say, you know, definitely less than 1/4 inch, at least maybe 2 threads less than 1/4 inch. And I'm going to sew on the outside of this, and I'm going to sew on the outside of that line here and there, come all the way back. Then I'm going to go to the inside of that purple line, a scant 1/4 inch. I'm going to sew here, 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 and here. So I've sewn a rectangle on the inside and the outside of that purple, of those purple lines. I'm going to do the very same thing on this side. So my stitching lines are only going around each of these purple rectangles that I have drawn. So I've brought you over here to the sewing machine, and I have this laid on the machine. I am using the foot that I love to use. Looks like this. It's a 1/4 inch foot. It's got these little red markings. I have linked this foot below in my description box in previous videos, but I'll link it again. I really like this foot because it truly is a 1/4 inch on each side of that edge, and so I love using it. It really helps me to ensure that I get not only 1/4 inch seam allowances, but scant 1/4 inches when I need to as well. So I'm going to start, I guess I'll just start on the inside here. And so I've positioned my foot right in the 1/4 inch, but it's kind of on that diagonal line there. Not sure if you can see that real well, but I'm going to go ahead and stitch around, and I'll come back and I'll also stitch around the outside edge. So I'll show you that here in just a second. Sewing this with the cream thread really is impossible for you to see what I'm doing, so I have put in a black thread for the top so that you're able to see how I'm sewing this. So I will get that done, and I'll bring it back to the tabletop here in a minute. I've finished sewing around both rectangles. This rectangle here has white thread, which you can't see. I apologize for that. I should have put the dark thread on right away, but I've sewn around the outside of that rectangle, that purple rectangle, and around the inside a scant 1/4 of an inch on both sides of the drawn line. I've done the same thing here. You can see, I believe, the purple line. Let me make sure I bring this down closer for you. Here is the purple line that I've drawn, and I have sewn a scant 1/4 of an inch on each side of that drawn line. Now it's time to cut this apart to get our 32 2.5 inch half square triangles. The first thing that I'm going to do is cut on those blue half marks, which is the 5.5 inch vertical and horizontal line. So I'm lining up my ruler on that line, and I am cutting there. And I'll line up my ruler on that 1/2 inch or halfway mark, which is 5.5 inches from either end, and cut there. So now I have some squares here. I missed a thread. All right, so we have that done. Now I'm going to cut on the purple line and get rid of, or separate these outer half square triangles. So there's 4 outer half square triangles that I will obtain once I cut on the purple line. Then I can cut on the inside lines, or you could do it by cutting the inside lines first, because there's 4 half square triangles in here, and there are 4 half square triangles on the outside. So let me show you that. So let's just cut on the vertical horizontal lines first. We'll go ahead and do that. Line them back up. I should have my rotating mat here. All right, so I have, oops, I missed a thread again. So we have a number of these. Now what I'm going to do is cut on the purple line. That's the drawn line. That was the line that I had drawn to create the rectangle. And I will cut all of these and just separate. Oops, I messed that up, didn't I? All right, so from this quadrant, I have a total of 8 half square triangles. And you'll want to make sure you square them all up, but they should be very, very close to 2.5 inches. So get yours cut apart and get them squared up. Now, if you have, if you're finding that your half square triangle units don't measure 2.5 inches, maybe they're smaller than 2.5 inches, that just means that you are having a hard time making sure that you're sewing scant 1/4 inches. There's an easy way to solve that. If you want to start out with 11.5 inch squares, find that middle mark and then find the middle marks to create your grid. Once you've created your grid, then you can go ahead and produce your rectangles and then sew and then cut out your half square triangles. That'll give you a little bit larger square. You'll end up with something that's more like closer to a 3-inch half square triangle, and that's fine. You can simply just square up each one of them then so that they are 2.5 inches. And you'll see here mine is a little bit bigger than 2.5 inches. Not much. It's a little bit bigger right here, not quite so much over here. But I'm going to have to square up each and every one to 2.5 inches, and you'll find there won't be a whole lot that has to come off. And I do like to use my Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer when I square them up, and I do use my rotating mat here when I square them up. So you'll simply just, in this case, I'm using trimmer A, which all of these are half square increments, and I'm going to line up this 2.5 inch stitching line on the ruler to the 2.5 inch stitching line on the half square triangle. And you'll see here that there isn't much that has to come off, but that little bit is very important so that you've got perfect half square triangles each time. And as I've mentioned before, you can either press your seam allowances to the dark, or you can press it open. If you want to press them open, they will be a much flatter half square triangle unit. You might want to reduce the length of your stitching line to maybe a 2-point or a 2.2, just to make sure that your stitching doesn't pop open when you're quilting. But it's a fabulous way to create a total of 32 half square triangles so very quickly. This is the method that I used when I created my patriotic star here for the 4th of July. This is week number 43 of my Scrappy series. I have a 52-week series of Scrappy Blocks, and this is week number 43. I'll have it linked below here, and you can always go out to my channel, Quilting with Lori, and go to my playlist for my 52-week series, and you can find all of the blocks that I've created, many of them with half square triangles. But I made these half square triangles using this method. And I used an 11-inch square and just started making my grid, finding the halfway point and then finding the halfway point in there to create a perfect grid. If you choose to maybe go 11.5-inch square for your light and your dark, that's fine. Just find your halfway point and your halfway point there, and then of course the halfway points there, and create your grid on whatever size you're using. If you want to go with even a 12-inch, just to make sure that you're obtaining your 2.5-inch half square triangle unit. Some people have a hard time making sure that their 1/4-inch seam allowances are scant, and that's not a problem. You can just start out with larger squares and you can still obtain the same thing. You can get 32 half square triangles out of this type of grid. And basically what you're doing, once you've created your grid, you are then creating the 2 long rectangles that go at a diagonal across each square, and then you're going to sew on a scant 1/4 inch on each side of those rectangles, and then you're going to cut on the horizontal and vertical, and then you're going to cut on the drawn line to separate all of your half square triangles, and you'll end up with 32. It's a wonderful way to create half square triangles. We all have fat quarters in our stash, so you can certainly cut some great pieces out of your fat quarters to get started. But that is how I created this, the half square triangles for this. I needed 27 half square triangles in this block. So this was a great method to do that. So if you have a quilt project where you do need a lot of half square triangles, try this method. I think you'll enjoy it. I hope to hear from you all. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. And don't forget to check out the links below for my Speedy Solutions techniques for my 52-week series of Scrappy Blocks and all of the other things that I have out on my channel. Have a wonderful week, and we'll be seeing you next in about a day or two. I have some more projects that I'll be posting. So until then, happy quilting.